The two things we really zero in on people are, two things. They sound simple, they end up being very difficult. Courage and genius. Courage is the one we talk about a lot because it's the one that people can learn. Courage, which is to say not giving up in the face of adversity, just being absolutely determined to succeed, is something that you can like force yourself to do. It can be very painful. You can force yourself to do it. The genius part is a little bit hard to force yourself to do. Courage without genius might not get you where you need to go, but genius without courage almost certainly.
If you're not utilizing an online community, then you're at a disadvantage to those who are. You can be asking online communities what they think about your ideas, or if they have any advice with what you're working on. Not only will you hear from people who are passionate about the subject, but you'll be hearing from people all around the world, each with their own experiences and stories that can help you.
What it comes down to is doing something exceptional for your users, whether it's in community, whether it's in connection, or whether it's in design. This is our big advantage as a startup, is that we can actually get away with doing this. We can make this the core part of why we're doing business.
So I kind of like half jokingly with a lot of people say that, my job is basically like to be the assistant for the rest of the company. Like my job is to make sure that like you have what you need, that it's and basically you have everything you need to kick ass. Like that's my job. If you don't have that, then let me know because I'm not doing my job.
The definition of values is they're the behaviors or principles that you religiously adhere to within your company. When I say religious, I mean that no amount of data will sway you from those principles, and the degree to which that you have the courage to maintain your conviction around those ideas is the degree to which you're going to be successful over the long term.
Like there's almost this expectation that you have to have in your mind this sort of I'm going to change the world, sort of make a dent in the universe kind of ambition, right? But it's actually okay early on to just kind of solve small problems in layers until you actually get to a point where you have the capacity to do that.
The most important thing when you're working with people early is that you guys line up on what your goals are. That sounds really basic, but you can totally, it can be fine. You can want to build a small business that makes money and you don't have to go to an office every day. Or you can want to build a huge company. You can want to build Google, but I think you have to be really, really aligned on.
And oftentimes the best methodology is to start with the perfect experience with just one person, get that right, and then figure out how to scale something great instead of scaling something not so great and then trying to improve it. That's really hard to do.
And there are a lot of people from whom we can learn a lot. And I think the one piece of advice is like, don't underestimate anyone you come across ever. Right. Like whether they're a blue collar worker waiting for the bus, or they're helping you they're the server or bartender at the restaurant, or they're a lower ranking employee. I mean, the smartest leaders I've ever seen have always gone around the room and asked for everybody's opinion.
One way to conceptualize what makes a good product is, good engineering is part of it, good design is part of it, but really it's, one way I think about it is maximizing the probability that someone shows up at the front door of your store or your website or whatever it is and ends up with a solved problem.
And I think the reality is just, not quite so glamorous. There's there's an ugly side to being an entrepreneur. And also just more importantly, what you're actually spending your time on is just a lot of hard work. Sam mentioned this, but you're basically just sitting at your desk, heads down, focused, answering customer support emails, doing sales, figuring out hard engineering problems. So it's really important that you kind of like go in with eyes wide open.
Constantly seek criticism.
Yeah.
A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. And you should seek that from everyone you can, but particularly your friends.
If you don't love it, you won't make it through the long period of pain that is inevitable. So make sure that you take care of yourself during the process. Make sure that you take care of your mental health, your physical health while you're doing it, because it's a long road.
And so it's not just about doing focus groups. It's not just about double checking your vision. It really is about integrating this concept of testing our ideas rigorously throughout the product development process, throughout the marketing process, even as we scale.
The hardest thing to do is start. You have all these ideas, and everyone has an idea, but it's really about executing the idea and building the idea and attracting other people to help you work on the idea. That is the biggest challenge. But the way to begin is to get the idea out of your head, draw it out, talk about it, program it if you're a programmer, or make it if you're building something.
I think you should be spending your money on teaching and sharing, and so that might mean hiring a writer or two, perhaps, instead of a marketing person. And start writing and start getting people to listen to what you're saying. You can't talk about yourself all the time because no one's going to come back for that, but you have to talk about things that are relevant to your industry or ideas that you have and start to build that audience up.
Another quality that I think is important is kind of being flexible-minded or open-minded. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a vision for your idea or your product, but you need to be open to changes.
There are a lot of things that are outside of your control. A lot of external circumstances will determine the success of your idea, whether the market timing's right for this new kind of service, or whether people, whether a customer, like the economy's right for your kind of service, right? Whether you meet the right people who will finance your company. Many external circumstances are outside of your control but will affect the outcome, and you have to be okay with it.
You should find a great partner no matter what it is that you're doing, and you should look for someone who is very high intelligence, very high energy, and very high integrity. And you need all three of those. You can't compromise on any one of them. Otherwise, you'll end up with either someone who's not smart, which does you no good, or someone who's not hardworking, which also does you no good, or the worst case is you end up with a smart, hardworking crook who ends up working against your interests. And integrity is something that takes a lot of time spent with someone to figure out.
You don't have to be the best, but you have to be dangerous, right? You have to learn just enough to be dangerous to build an idea, concept it, and show it to the world. And then it turns out there are lots of other people, including all 170 employees that work at Instagram, who are much better at doing all that stuff than I am. But you need to find people who can, be drawn to the idea that you build, and then they end up taking it and making it even.
But what you really need to do is think about what is the smallest possible test that I can run for this idea, for this concept, for this theory, get it out there and get customers using it. Because your customers are going to be the ones to tell you if it's really working or not.
The two things we really zero in on people are, two things. They sound simple, they end up being very difficult. Courage and genius. Courage is the one we talk about a lot because it's the one that people can learn. Courage, which is to say not giving up in the face of adversity. Just being absolutely determined to succeed. Is something that you can force yourself to do. It can be very painful. You can force yourself to do it. The genius part is a little bit hard to force yourself to do. Courage without genius might not get you where you need to go, but genius without courage almost certainly.
So many things go wrong when you're starting a company, and often I think people ask, what mistakes should you avoid making? And my answer to that question is don't even bother trying to avoid mistakes because you're going to make tons of mistakes, right? And the important thing is actually learning quickly from whatever mistakes you make and not giving up. Right, and there are things every single year of Facebook's existence that could have killed us or made it so that it just seemed like moving forward and making a lot of progress just seemed intractable, but you just kind of bounce back and you learn, and nothing is impossible. You just have to kind of keep running through the walls.
Most startups that fail do it ultimately because they did not make something that people wanted. They made something that, that they thought people would want, but they were either in denial about it, whether it was actually any good, or somebody else came along and made something that people wanted even more.
One of the things I advise entrepreneurs to do is when you have an idea, a classic entrepreneurial impulse is to hold the idea close to you and not go tell people because, the idea is so special.
Right.
That's almost always a mistake. Go talk to
Why is that a mistake? Yeah.
It's a mistake because your actual real competitive advantage is not that you have this idea that you have locked away in your closet, which may or may not be accurate and you have no idea which it is. Your actual competitive advantage is if you're assembling the intelligence around, does this idea work? What is the right teams? What is the right learnings? And we're essentially in motion.
A company is simply a group of people. As a leader of people, you have to be a great listener. You have to be a great motivator. You have to be very good at praising and looking for the best in people. People are no different from flowers. If you water flowers, they flourish. If you praise people, they flourish. And that's a critical attribute of a leader.
So when we see a kid with a lemonade stand, it's different than when we see a vending machine selling lemonade, even if it's exactly the same product, because the story around it is what people are paying for. So when I meet small business people, all I ask them is not what's their balance sheet, but what's their story. Why should I pick you? Why do I care about what you're doing? And if you start giving me all this inside baseball statistics about why you're 2% better than some other competitor, I'm already glazed over, because that's not part of the way I see the world.
This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist?
Optimism has a place, but I think even more so for the first-time entrepreneur, you need to be pragmatically pessimistic. What I mean by that is you need to define all of the worst-case scenarios in terms of financial loss, time loss, etc. Look at what you will learn if that happens and accept and come to terms with that before you ever start. If you don't do that and you go straight into battling the world, trying to conquer the world with rose-colored glasses on, the first time you hit a major hiccup, you're going to become really demoralized and you will quit.
When a lot of corporations have, they might call them core values or guiding principles or so on, but the problem is usually they're very lofty sounding. They kind of read like a press release the marketing department put out. They sound just like their competitors, and maybe you learn about it on day one of your job, but then it becomes this meaningless plaque on the lobby wall. Well, we wanted to come up with committable core values, and by committable, meaning we're willing to hire or fire people based on those values, completely independent of their actual job performance.